Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with Mr. Snyder. Today we are skipping ahead to Chapter 6, and we're going to be talking about the New South and the development of the West. Learning targets for today. Explain how the Southern economy changed in the late 1800s. That could get kind of confusing, so make sure that you use those sub-targets that you have been provided. Analyze how the Southern farmers consolidated their political power, brought together, and rebounded from their problems. And then what was life like for African Americans in the New South after the Civil War? Let's get started. So before the Civil War, the South basically was just a place for raw materials like cotton, wood, iron ore that got shipped northward to be made into other products. But now we're going to start building products right in the South. So northern investors in the 1880s came and backed new factories for textiles and cigar manufacturers, lumber production and coal, iron and steel processing plants were just put in the South so that the products, the finished products, could be made right there. Also, farming diversified, because before farming was mostly done with cotton. Now it's done with some grain and some fruit. So when you think of Georgia, you think of peanuts and peaches, hopefully. When you think of Florida, you think of more citrus fruits like oranges and grapefruits. So they diversify during this time and become more specialized in those fruits. Whoa! Now, how did they transport stuff? They actually expand the railroad lines. You remember one of the advantages of the North in the Civil War was that they had more railroads and they could ship stuff easier. Well, now we're going to expand the rail lines in the South, and they are going to join up more rural areas with urban hubs, and new rail lines are going to form. And here's a map of that, and you can see all of the lines in purple were the ones before connects the major cities like Atlanta, Charleston, Richmond, Memphis, but now the green ones are in 1870. So post-Civil War, we really expand our rail lines and get the commerce moving in the South. But how was the economic recovery limited? We have to repair the damages from the Civil War, so it takes more money and time, and the economy lags behind in the South. The industry in the South needs capital investment and labor, and the South doesn't have enough of those. We don't have enough education and training available in the South to train the workers, and low wages discourage the workers from coming to the South to work. Why move there if you can make more in the North? How did farmers face hard times? Well, a lot of them used cash crops, and they only grew the crops for money. They can't be used for anything else except selling. And people wanted to grow cotton despite its decreasing price because of its ease, I guess, to harvest. And bad weather ends up destroying the crops. European buyers end up finding their crops elsewhere. And the boll weevil, a little insect, devastates crops for a few years even. So how do the farmers consolidate? They develop into something called the Farmers Alliance, and they are going to negotiate for lower prices. And they also want to convince the government to regulate rail lines and banks. Regulate rail lines so that they can get a lower price since they're farmers. And they also want to regulate the bank interest on loans, because banks back then could charge whatever they wanted, and now it's regulated by the government. So eventually they get what they want, but not in the 1870s.
What do blacks gain during the South? We're going to talk about how they gain and how they lose. Black Southerners gain access to education. That is number one. Colleges in the South pop up specifically for blacks and are still there today after the Civil War to educate the black population. They also hold public office, they serve in the military, they buy farmland, they open their own businesses, and they participate in the Farmers Alliance because the white farmers thought that they would have more of a whole if they represented blacks as well. Black Southerners lose in ways that the whites in the South, they've lost their entire way of life. They have lost everything. And so the KKK and organizations like them take out their frustrations on blacks by using terror and violence. And Jim Crow laws also target blacks. And Jim Crow laws are laws that treat blacks differently. It's de jure segregation. And lastly, the Civil Rights Act of 1875. It was initially a victory, stating that blacks have the right to ride trains and use public facilities in the South and cannot be discriminated against. But in 1883, the Supreme Court rules this unconstitutional, and that those decisions shouldn't be made by the federal government, but they should only be made on a state and local level. Now, lastly, your review. So what positive steps did the South take to industrialize after the Civil War? They diversified their industry by starting coal, iron, and steel processing plants, and they built more railroads. How did Southern agriculture suffer from the domination of cotton? Cotton prices fell because of loss of buyers. Other buyers went to go elsewhere and find cotton in Europe, and European buyers bought cotton elsewhere as well. And also the boll weevil infestations of the 1890s hurt the cotton crop as well. So that's it for Section 1. That's how the South changed after the Civil War. And next time we'll move into the Indians and how the West changed. See you later.